Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hey there.
Hi.
Happy summer.
Happy summer.
It's officially here. You're out of school.
It's finally here.
How does it feel? Does it feel real yet?
No, not yet. We're getting there.
Yeah, I haven't adjusted to it yet. I still feel like you're going to be at school, and I'm prepping for you to be in school and thinking about you being in school. I can't imagine what you're doing.
I'm not ready yet, but I'm getting there.
Okay. Well, we're doing what has become an annual tradition of a year in review episode. Before we do that, just a couple of quick announcements. We encourage you to sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. You can get updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings, everything like that from Moonbeam Multimedia. This is how you're going to hear from us over the summer, too. We're taking a short break for the summer season. We're going to be back in, I believe it's the first week of September. We'll be ready to go for a new season of 16 to 1. In the meantime, if there's a story in your local educational community that you would like us to cover in our upcoming season, please contact us using our website or write to us hello@16to1.com. This episode is sponsored by Moonbeam Multimedia. That's us. We're now booking professional development sessions for the 2025-26 school year, including our Policy Institute on the use of artificial intelligence in education, a collaborative workshop for K-12 and college educators and administrators designed to help your educational community tackle difficult questions about academic integrity, the ethics of new educational technologies, and policies that prioritize student and educator welfare. For more information or to book a session, visit moonbeammultimedia.com. This has become something of a tradition. I feel like I now finally, what is this, year 5? The end of year 5, right?
I think so. I think that's what we decided.
This is the end of year 5 of the pod, and I finally maybe settled on a format for this episode. Where
I understand this episode less every year we do it. Every time we do this episode, I open up the notes and it's a complete surprise to me what's being asked.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Well,
it's nice to never know what's next.
Here, I'll explain the premise a little bit. I'll put the learning goals on the board. Okay.
Students will be able to.
Tell
us our SWABits.
SWABits are, this is really just kind of a nod to reflection as a form of learning, really. That's all it is. I promise.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like a recap, but just kind of like a check-in with our curiosity about some of these things. Mm-hmm. So let's start with a quick look back. You accomplished a big reading goal over the past year.
I did.
How did that go?
2024. Yeah.
Well,
I read.
We're counting it the academic year for our listeners. That's why we do our year in review right now.
Well, the only problem with that is that my calendar for reading is yearly, not academic. But so the year 2024, I read 60 books. My goal was not 60, but I ended up there. I was really happy with 60, but I set my goal for 40 this year because what I found myself doing, I'm a completionist. I wasn't always reading for the enjoyment, which is actually my goal, was setting a book goal.
That's wise.
So I set it for 40 this year. I'm probably about on pace right now because we've read a lot the past couple weeks since school ended. I think I've read like 3 books already this summer.
Yeah.
So
we had a really long road trip and we crushed some audiobooks.
But the other thing that I'm trying to be mindful of is that with all the fellowships that I've been doing the last couple of years and this summer too, I have a lot of required reading. Not that I don't enjoy those, but it's just not quite the same. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to read more of what I really want to read and trying to enjoy it.
Did you feel
than I'm trying to be where, I mean, I am someone who's very motivated by I'm behind my schedule, so I need to read.
When you're talking about being a completionist, did you find you said you were not necessarily reading things you wanted to be reading. Did that mean that you were like starting books that you would have otherwise abandoned and you kept going with them?
Yeah. Like I just saw things through that I would have
just
never
for the sake of getting to the.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when I have a goal, when I have this number, when I have whatever, I will complete it, even to the detriment of me.
I'm trying to be a little bit more focused with my time too, and also not spend time reading things that I don't enjoy as much. I usually do not abandon books once I start reading them, but I did over the past year. I had one DNF that I was just like, I can't do this.
Yeah, I try to finish them all. Mm-hmm. It's very hard though.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my goal, is to be more intentional about what I'm reading, not just doing it for the sake of checking it off of my goal for the year, but to also actually pick things that I want to read.
I've very nearly finished all of James Glick's books. I've talked about him a lot on this podcast.
Is he a sponsor of ours?
Yeah, I mean,
does he pay
I wish.
You?
No, not sponsored.
I hear about him more than most.
I want him to come on the pod and talk to me about science writing.
He probably thinks you're obsessed with him.
Well, I might be a little bit, but
okay, that's
I think
not a way to get a guess.
Not in a creepy way, just in a I like this writing.
That's what
kind
everyone
of way.
says, not the creepy way.
So, I mean, reading these books has reminded me of the importance of clear, considerate, timely science writing. And his writing does this thing where it gets like the macroscopic view and he can zoom in on these little details. He talks about these vast cultural impacts of inventions and discoveries and technologies and the advance of science. But he also zooms in on these tiny little details of the lives of these people and their work. Einstein, Feynman, Newton. That's why I say I'm almost done with all of his books. I'm just probably like 2/3 of the way through the very last one that I have to read of his on Isaac Newton. So
nice.
The ability to understand present scientific progress in a historical context, what's shared across generations, what's novel, that's been important to rediscover. And then he's very good at pointing out that science and scientists proceed in their work by being unafraid of failure. That's a thing that I've found really valuable from his work, is that he's just like, these guys were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I'm hoping he does some writing on artificial intelligence, just because it's so gripping everybody right now. I feel like his clear-eyed writing on science and technology could really benefit people. So anyway, that's what I've been doing over the past year. So tell me more about all these fellowships that you were.
My goal for next summer is to do 0 fellowships. I'm putting this out there so that later Katie remembers.
You're putting scholarship on pause for 1 year.
Well, teachers have to renew their license every 5 years. I already have all my CEUs, my continuing education requirements, completed for the summer of 2027 because I won't stop saying yes to things. So going to Auschwitz this summer with the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Foundation. I'm finishing up my fellowship with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum this summer in Washington, D.C. So I'll be doing some stuff for next school year, this upcoming school year. Then I'll be done. And then I'm not doing anything next summer. I'm just vacationing.
You're just vacationing?
I'm not.
Only resting.
I will not be traveling anywhere historical. I will not be doing any of that.
Yeah, that's fair. So you had mentioned to me that you are now noticing that you can feel yourself entering burnout a little bit. What is that experience? Just to help people know how to look out for this.
I take learning about the Holocaust and teaching about the Holocaust very seriously. It's probably one of the most important things that I think I do in my classroom. And I also think it's probably the most important thing I do professionally by attending these things. But I am getting worn out, which is a very privileged thing to get to say. And I'm aware of that. But I don't ever want to become so jaded by my activities that I'm not getting the most out of it, doing the most with it, being the most productive, all of those things. I want to make sure I'm giving myself time to be in the right headspace to do these things as well as they deserve. They deserve all of my attention, all of my effort. The way that the cards kind of fell is just these things just lined up and I couldn't say no. You know what I mean? So probably not the way I would have gone about doing these things otherwise, but because of
you would have staggered them
these
a little
opportunities,
more, maybe.
Yeah, I just couldn't turn it down. So I'm coming from a place of great privilege and I recognize that, but I also want to do it the justice that it deserves. And I do think I'm approaching just the need for a brain break, just professionally. A lot of my teaching the last 3 years has been centered around these things, which has been really wonderful. But what else could I be doing and how else could I be doing it? And will a moment pause make me better? That's my hope.
Do you think you're going to take the time to find a sort of new
I'm really telling myself nothing next summer.
You're not going to, well, no, I mean,
I'm really telling myself that.
Are you going to use the downtime to try to locate a new scholarly interest? Is that something that
do I need one more special interest? Probably. Of course. I always love a special interest.
Okay.
I am going to be, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I'm prepping a new couple of courses for next school year.
Yeah.
So those are on my mind a lot. And that's kind of where I think a lot of my focus will be, is just kind of evolving what I'm teaching. I'm excited.
I'm going to proceed by means of tackling a couple of big questions about teaching and learning and the future of education. The first, this is an easy one. I'll just pitch it to you. What's the purpose of education?
Oh my gosh. See, this is what I mean. When I open up these notes and this is the question, I just closed my iPad and I said, I'm going to take a nap and I'll come back to this.
Oh, you want me to go first?
I do.
Grease the wheels.
I do want you to grease these wheels, yeah.
So here's how I'll answer this. And this is, again, a kind of reflection over the last year that we've had on the pod here. And I would say that over the last year, and most definitely over the last 6 months or so, we've been having more and more conversations about academic freedom, funding for academic research, academic governance, leadership, values within higher education, also K-12. I would check out our episode 124 with Jeremy C. Young on this. We had a great conversation to talk about academic freedom, censorship. But the takeaways for me that I've had over the past year is that education really should be about nurturing curiosity. There are a lot of things that can get in the way of that. Grades even can do that. You know, things we don't necessarily expect, things we consider to be part of the normal school day can get in the way of nurturing curiosity. Grades, technologies that help us take shortcuts like AI, we've talked a lot about, political agendas, religious ideologies, outdated beliefs. Basically, it comes down to unexamined opinions a lot of the time. But I think part of the job of the educator is to minimize distractions that get in the way of curiosity, both for educators themselves and for students in the classroom. So what about you?
I wrote up that this is a question that I'm always wrestling with in my head, because early in my career, I would have said that the purpose was to make my students as prepared for what's next, right? I think I was trying to create them to be the best cog in the machine. It's just like making these little people into adults to go do things in the world that we need them to do, which is like kind of a goofy way of saying it. But I think early on in my career, I wasn't valuing the individual needs. I also wasn't even valuing like my own opinion and my own beliefs and my own thoughts and whatever about what that should look like. And so I think I've had to learn to kind of grow to trust myself, and I've had to learn to grow to trust my students.
I think that experience you describe is probably common for educators starting out. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that at first your job is to try to help students fill a certain role.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're graded on like how many kids go to college and how many drop out and how many do this and you know, so you get hung up on all this data because that's what your career gets boiled down to. And the more data that I got, the less it reflected me and my students.
Interesting.
And so those numbers are important for whoever values them, but that's not me. And that's not something I would have said probably in the first 5 years of teaching. And now, you know, I've already got my student test data back for the summer, and I just read it and said, okay, we'll figure out what to do with these kids. And it rolls off my shoulders now, you know.
I'm curious about how your view of your own agency in the education system has evolved. Did you put too much on your own shoulders when you started out in terms of like responsibility for outcomes?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But I would also say that maybe now I'm slipping away a little bit, probably from what the state would hope to see. Just because I'm not teaching to the test in my classroom. I am not doing those things like I used to be. And I've just also had to let things roll off of me that I once would have really been bothered by.
We're also teaching different kinds of students too.
Yeah.
So
my population has shifted almost completely in the last 2 years. So there's a lot of change going on in my classroom, which is hard because I am a creature of habit. But I feel good about it where I am. It feels healthier than it has in a long time, I will say.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, me too.
Next question. Who gets to learn and how?
Yeah. Where'd you go with this?
Well, we took a really detailed structural approach to this question in our episode 132 this past year, our conversation with Vivian Van Gelder, the education researcher who was talking with us about Seattle Public Schools. That's a district that has really struggled to unite around a shared vision of school success. That was just such a fascinating conversation. I loved talking with her about that. She was so knowledgeable. But I think my takeaway from that was that to reach students who come from all kinds of backgrounds, who have all kinds of educational needs, schools and universities need leaders who are focused on engaging the entire community in the project of learning. In K-12, this means district superintendents and school administrators who are aligned behind a really clearly articulated strategic vision there's a delicate balance there, like a control without micromanagement and value-aligned work that doesn't devolve into groupthink.
Yeah.
That's really hard. That was my takeaway. What about you?
I thought a lot about our episode with Megan Helberg, episode 121.
Mm-hmm.
Megan is one of my mentors for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, my teacher fellowship there. And so we had her on to talk about what her rural community is like, because even though she's in Nebraska, lots of similarities. One of the things that Megan talked a lot about was how to make community in places that maybe doesn't totally reflect who you are, and how to hang on to community and build community in those places. And I think about that conversation a lot. I think that I bring that to the community in which I work. I think I bring it to the community in which I live. I think that it's important to have outside voices and perspectives and things like that. But I also know that sometimes that's what makes you feel isolated and other and things like that. And so there's like a really fine line to walk between trying to build community and have people buy into you and to support you and trust you, while also trying to show them all these other parts of who they are and could be. And that's really hard. The one thing that Megan talked about was her travel club that she ran when she was teaching. And it was an opportunity for not only her students, but even other people in the community to get to go places that they'd never been. And I've talked about this on the pod, but a couple years ago, I got to take a trip with some of our students to DC. I can't tell you how many of those kids had never left the state before, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that was eye-opening for me. Even when I taught in another rural Appalachian school district, I remember taking kids to Columbus. They'd never been there. And so one of the goals of the next couple of years is for a coworker and I to start building maybe some trips like Philly or something like that, to try to give our kids these opportunities to go places. And I think that small town, rural community is beautiful. Obviously, I live in one and I work in one. But
shelter can be both good and bad.
It is.
Because shelter can give you a space to explore, especially in educational communities. That kind of detachment from the concerns of the world can give you a really good space to learn, but it can also divorce you from the context in which you need to exercise your learning.
Right.
So
hard. I think I'm trying to find kind of that middle, like what Megan talked about. Provide opportunities, provide learning, provide support, but also to kind of break down those things, because I never want my kids to be afraid to be somewhere. Like, we should not fear traveling to places if we're doing it in a smart way. Now that I'm also like the most anxious person on earth who is afraid of every possible thing that could ever go wrong. So that's a lot coming from me, but I do know that I've been made better by traveling and by experiencing others and experiencing new places. And that's where I am, I think. It's going to be kind of a goal. Get our kids moving and out there and try to make some connections that way.
Next up, how do we best learn?
Are you going to talk about some psychologists right now?
Well,
you're going to talk about some psychologists right now.
We did talk about two psychologists this past season that were both pretty important conversations. Yeah. We talked about B.F. Skinner in episode 112, and we talked about Jerome Bruner in episode 126. People continue to have interesting reactions to Skinner and the behaviorists.
Yes.
And Jerome Bruner himself is obviously kind of a reaction to Skinner and the behaviorists. But I walked away from those episodes thinking that our educational philosophies and practices depend a great deal on what we think the goal of learning is and where the line is or should be drawn when it comes to guiding student behaviors toward those goals. Stifling student curiosity comes with a deep cost, and we have to be really careful that our ideas about teaching and learning don't come at the cost of completely smothering curiosity. That was kind of my takeaway from the educational psychology conversations. So what about you?
These conversations about curiosity have actually been really good for me, because I've gone back through and redone and actually built new units allowing for more of that. And they went 50-50. There were a lot of kids who loved the chance to be more curious and creative and self-motivating. And then there were others that were like, can you just tell me what to do? Which is always the case. I don't know. A psychologist would probably have a field day with that, right? To know that some kids would rather just be told what to do and how to do it, while others would rather kind of take that into their own hands. But I have found, I think, in some of these units, ways to kind of meet them in the middle where the foundation is pretty strong and pretty formulaic. And then from there, their individuality gets to come in by way of like who they pick to write about or research or something like that. So I do think student curiosity is important, obviously. But I also know that our students have not been trained to encourage their own curiosity or to pursue it or to whatever. And so that's kind of...
Yeah, the can you just tell me what to do tells me that
they don't get to do it
they
often.
think that their job is to fill in blanks that are being put out in front of them.
And it is. So it is hard sometimes because in my head, I'm like, I'm giving you this rope. Take it. Run with it. See where you end up. And they're like, or tell me the prompt. So.
Okay, what about what's worth unlearning?
Oh, man. I feel like pretty much anything that I've been taught in my life, I'm now questioning. Like, just broadly speaking. I think it was like 2 years ago, I really started asking students, is it true? And that could be something they said, something they read, something they were told, whatever. And just kind of breaking it down from there. But for me personally, kind of been talking about how I'm shifting as an educator here. But when I first got my job, I read books and I studied what I thought a teacher should be. And like, that's only like 5% of what it is. Maybe not even 5%. I don't know what Harry Wong would say about that. He probably wouldn't be too pleased. But what I have found is that I have to unlearn a lot of that formal learning because that's not what my classroom is like.
Oh,
that's
you have
not
to like
what my students are like.
Unlearn a by the book approach.
Yeah. Because that's what my undergrad was, right? Like that's what it was. You read books about teaching and I was very by the book in those ways when I was younger. I don't think it was bad. I think it was probably a good, safe start. But now I'm like, oh, Katie.
I mean, it kind of sounds like you're describing scaffolding. Like you started
I've
out
scaffolded
with more
myself
support.
into this, but I've scaffolded myself to unlearning instead of learning,
Jerome
which I think
Bruner
is,
would be proud.
Would he?
You're taking down the scaffolding.
I'm removing the scaffolding and saying, was this,
it's
we're
like taking
scaffolding upon.
You're taking off the training wheels. It's good.
And I'm,
to mix
but
metaphors.
I've changed the tires completely. I'm not just taking off the training wheels. I've went and bought my own.
You got a new bike.
I think that's what I'm unlearning. So not only am I applying it to literally everything I've ever read anywhere in my life, is it just because people have said this is good in education and that's why I do it? Or do I know it's good because I've seen it be good?
I think a lot of our science of reading conversations have gone down that direction for me because so much of that whole controversy was like, we've been teaching this method for so long because so many people were united behind it's being the best practices. And then what happened there was
that doesn't matter when it's not a good practice.
Best practices were being measured in one particular way. And it turns out that way we were measuring wasn't necessarily the way we should have been measuring student success and student outcomes. So those conversations have refocused me on what really are the measures of success that we should be evaluating against when it comes to student learning. So,
well, and it's also, I mean, unlearning is in little things too. It's in big things. It's in the stories our kids have been taught when they were little about Johnny Appleseed and Thanksgiving and Martin Luther King Jr. There are big things to unlearn and to rescope and to bring to light. But there are also, I think sometimes educators we have a hard time being told that how we've been doing something is not good for kids because we want to believe that we've done good. And that's hard. It's hard to know that what I've been teaching wasn't right for these reasons. And it's not because I want to be wrong or I refuse to be wrong. It's because I'm disappointed that I wasn't doing the best I could. Or at least that's my angle on unlearning. What are you unlearning?
I unlearned some pessimism. How about that? I rediscovered...
You did?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I rediscovered...
Is it because you wrote it or because you did it?
No, I really did. I unlearned pessimism and I rediscovered optimism about local journalism and civic health. And
that's probably true for
you.
It
really did. From our last episode, the last one that came out, episode 134 on the reporting project at Denison University, it's worth unlearning everything we know about how news reaches communities. Denison students are really leading the way with these beautifully crafted narrative journalism pieces. They're breathing connection back into a fragmented community. It's really cool to see students taking the lead in that work. But yeah, I thought that was worth unlearning.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
They're doing great work, and that's one of my favorite episodes also.
For sure.
We had some really good episodes this round,
we did.
I will say.
We had a great year.
I had some of our best conversations.
For sure.
So nice job on those. One last thing.
Yeah.
Where are we heading?
Well,
what's next?
I feel like we're on a boat floating down a river that's heading for a dark tunnel. And I guess I would just say we're going toward disruption. That's the best way I can know how to describe it right now. There are going to be a lot of opportunities to try new things and new ways forward. I know there's a tendency toward worry and lamentation with the chaos that's going on in the education system, definitely in public ed and higher education in the US right now. But I'm trying to find optimism in refocusing on communities, grassroots values and identities. It's been a common theme of our conversations this year. Redoubling efforts around finding new and different and better ways of communicating those identities and values through communities. It's kind of like a make or break moment, it feels like. We can choose to plant a flag and say, this is who we are, this is what we stand for. We stand for academic freedom. We stand for the safety of our students and our educators. As much as it's a scary time, I also think it's a time of opportunity. What do you think? Where are we headed?
Geez, what a great question. I mean, in Ohio, teachers are still is what I should say, still facing uncertainty. Even about next school year, the upcoming school year, we might be changing how many hours that students are in seats for, which could reshape school years and schedules and things like that. There's still the potential for that cell phone ban, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So there's a lot that could be changing. If there's one thing I know about education is that it's like the least stable thing on earth. So the good news is it's just one more punch to roll with. The bad news is it would be nice to know these things prior to June, but here we are. So yeah, I think I'm trying to look ahead and anticipate and to prepare and all of that, but I'm also trying to enjoy this time. I think one of my worst habits is I spend all of summer thinking about what's next and not actually enjoying what I'm doing. And so
not giving yourself a brain break.
Yeah. I mean, and I love the podcast, but that's one of the things I'm most excited for.
A little break from it.
Yeah. Because, and from everything, because we haven't had any of that. So teachers will figure it out and the school year will come and go and I'll still be doing my best. And that's all I can hope for.
Do you want to wrap up our answer from our last fill in the blank question, which was
so long ago.
Really long time ago? And we're not going to leave you hanging over the summer, so there's no fill in the blank question.
There's no homework.
Yeah, there's no homework.
Okay.
But what was the last fill in the blank question?
Our very last fill in the blank question. This was when we got a new pope. So at what age do cardinals no longer vote on the new pope? And that's when they turn 80.
80 years old.
You can vote for a pope up until your 80th birthday.
Okay, any final thoughts, parting shots for wrapping up the season of 16 to 1?
Thank you for listening and hanging in and kind of watching us shift and change over these 5 years. If you have any good book recommendations that are not education related, I would love those. If you have anything recommended to do, fun, see, watch, that's not
help me have
education, please send it because I'm so tired.
Help me rediscover joy.
I'm going to go to the pool and I'll see you on September.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Anyways. What are you doing? What's the sound effect?
Phew. Phew. Yeah, that's what it feels like right now.
What are you doing now?
I'm just going to sit here and smile.